Before the legend, there was a love story that grew through chaos, music, and survival. Jessi Colter and Waylon Jennings built a bond that weathered fame, addiction, and the pressures of life in the spotlight, holding on when everything around them threatened to break. For years after his passing, she kept much of that story close. But now, nearly 24 years later, Jessi is finally opening up, sharing what their life together really looked like behind the image the world thought it knew. So what was really happening behind closed doors during their years together? And why has she chosen now to finally tell that story? Join us as we get into all the details. The preacher's daughter who became an outlaw legend. Before she became Jessi Colter, she was Miriam Johnson, a girl growing up in Phoenix, shaped by rules, rhythm, and a life that didn't leave much room for anything in between. Born on May 25, 1943, her world was rooted in a strict Pentecostal home where faith wasn't just a belief, it was structure, expectation, and discipline. Her mother stood at the pulpit as a preacher. Her father lived a completely different life on the edge as a race car driver. And somewhere between those two extremes, Miriam began to find her own voice. That voice showed up early, and by the age of 11, she was already sitting behind the piano in church, playing not just notes, but emotion, learning how to hold a room without ever needing to say a word. And yet, as she grew older, the world outside that church started to call her in a different direction. After graduating from Mesa High School in 1961, she stepped into a new space, trading pews for stages, singing in local clubs around Phoenix, testing what her voice could become beyond the boundaries she was raised in. That same year, her life shifted again when she married guitarist Duane Eddy. Still going by Miriam Johnson, she tried to carve out her place in music, releasing 2 singles under the Jamie label. The first, Lonesome Road, managed to stir a little attention, picking up scattered airplay across a few U.S. markets, but it never quite broke through. The second didn't land at all, and just like that, the door she had tried to open didn't fully close, but it stopped moving. For nearly a decade, she stepped away from recording, staying on the road with Eddy, watching the industry from the sidelines instead of standing at the center of it. Until 1968, when that chapter came to an end with their divorce, leaving her at a quiet but defining crossroads. Then, almost as if the story had been waiting to restart, everything shifted again a year later when she met Waylon Jennings. This wasn't just another relationship or another step forward, it was a turning point. With his help, she secured a recording contract with RCA Victor, and alongside that, she stepped into a new identity, no longer Miriam Johnson, but Jessi Colter. By 1970, she was back, not cautiously, but fully, re-entering the music scene with a sense of direction that hadn't been there before. That same year, she and Jennings recorded duets that pushed into the top 40 on the country charts, marking the first real signs that something was finally connecting. On March 25, 1970, she appeared on The Johnny Cash Show, playing keyboard beside her husband, sharing a stage that carried its own weight and legacy through Johnny Cash. It all seemed like momentum was building towards something bigger, especially with the release of her debut album, A Country Star Is Born, produced by Jennings and Chet Atkins. But despite the names behind it and the effort poured into it, the album didn't land the way it needed to. It didn't break through, didn't leave a mark, and didn't shift her position in the industry the way anyone had hoped. And just as quickly as that chapter opened, it started to close. It became her only album with RCA, and soon after, she stepped away from the label entirely. Still, even in that quiet exit, traces of her remained, her face appearing on several of Jennings' record covers, almost like a reminder that while her own spotlight hadn't fully arrived yet, she was still right there, woven into the story, waiting for the moment everything would finally align. The song that defined an era, the story of I'm Not Lisa. By 1975, everything that had been building beneath the surface finally found its moment. Jessi Colter stepped into a new chapter when she signed with Capitol Records. And this time, the industry didn't just notice her, it stopped and listened. Because when she released I'm Not Lisa, something shifted. The song didn't feel like a push for attention. It felt like a quiet confession that somehow reached everywhere at once. It climbed to number 1 on the Billboard country chart and crossed over to the pop world, landing at number 4, a rare kind of breakthrough that placed her in 2 worlds at the same time. And just as that momentum began to rise, it carried straight into her next move. Her album I'm Jessi Colter followed in that same year, and instead of fading, the energy deepened. The record climbed to the top of the Cashbox Country Albums chart, held strong at number 4 on Billboard's Country Albums chart, and even pushed into the broader pop space, reaching number 50 on the Billboard 200. It wasn't just a moment anymore, it was a presence, one that was starting to feel steady, grounded, and real. From there, the story didn't slow down, it expanded. What's Happened to Blue Eyes emerged as the follow-up single, and once again, her voice carried weight. The song broke into the top 5 on the country charts and found its way onto the pop charts as well, continuing that delicate balance she had created between genres. At the same time, the B-side, You Ain't Never Been Loved Like I'm Gonna Love You, quietly found its own space, charting on the Pop Top 100 and adding another layer to what was becoming a complex and unfolding success. But just as things seemed to be aligning perfectly, something unexpected slipped in behind the scenes. Capitol made a bold and risky decision, pushing both songs to radio at the same time, without a clear direction. And suddenly, the clarity that her music carried became confusion within the system meant to support it. Radio programmers didn't know which record to play, which story to follow. Both tracks began to chart, but instead of strengthening her position, they competed against each other, splitting the momentum that had been building so naturally. By the time Capitol realized the misstep, it was already unfolding in real time. Full-page ads went out, trying to correct the narrative, declaring that they had flipped their decision and that What's Happened to Blue Eyes was the single to push forward. But the damage had already settled in. What could have been a seamless continuation of her pop success after I'm Not Lisa became something more fractured, a moment where timing and clarity slipped just enough to change the outcome. Still, even within that disruption, her presence didn't fade. The second single held its ground, becoming a strong country and pop success in its own right. And as the year moved forward, so did she, stepping onto bigger stages, including a nationwide tour alongside Waylon Jennings, with performances that carried that same emotional pull into live spaces, including the Santa Monica Civic Auditorium. By 1976, she didn't just return, she arrived with consistency. Her albums Jessi and Diamond in the Rough followed, and both opened strong, debuting at number 4 on the Top Country Albums chart. The single, It's Morning and I Still Love You, carried that same steady energy, becoming a top 15 country hit, while I Thought I Heard You Calling My Name added another charting moment to her growing catalog. And somewhere within all of this, her identity as an artist became clearer. She wasn't just chasing singles or riding trends, she was building something deeper, something rooted in albums, in sound, in feeling. Her music leaned into soul and rock just as much as it did country, setting her apart from the more traditional paths around her. She wasn't just part of the scene, she was reshaping where she fit inside it. As the decade continued, she stayed close to the road, touring with Jennings, while continuing to release new work. Miriam arrived in 1977, followed by That's the Way a Cowboy, Rocks and Rolls the year after, each project adding another layer to a career that had already seen its share of highs and unexpected turns. But slowly, almost quietly, the momentum began to change again. The success that had once surged so quickly started to ease, not all at once, but gradually, as the decade moved toward its end. And just like before, it wasn't a sudden fall, but a subtle change in rhythm, one that hinted that another transition was coming, even if it hadn't fully revealed itself yet. Jessi and Waylon, A Love Without Limits. Before the fame settled into something recognizable, Jessi Colter's life had already moved through one chapter and into another. Jessi Colter had first been married to Dwayne Eddy, a name that carried its own weight, its own rhythm. But when that marriage ended, it didn't leave her standing still. It led her somewhere else entirely. Because not long after, she met Waylon Jennings, and from the outside, it may have looked like another relationship beginning. but in reality, it was something deeper taking shape. They married on October 26, 1969, in the same Phoenix church where her mother once stood as a minister, a quiet, full-circle moment that tied her past into what was about to unfold. And from there, their lives didn't just run side by side, they intertwined. Together, they became part of something bigger, stepping into the outlaw movement that would change country music from the inside out. By 1976, that shift became undeniable when Wanted the Outlaws with Jennings, Colter, Willie Nelson, and Tom Paul Glaser became the first Nashville album to sell 1 million copies. But even with all of that, the most personal part of their story came later, in 1979, when their son, Shooter Jennings, was born. Because beyond the records and the movement, there was a life they were building together, one that held more weight than anything the charts could measure. And maybe that's why their connection felt different. Waylon had been through marriages that didn't hold, relationships that never quite reached him the way he needed. But with Jessi, something clicked. She saw him clearly, understood him in a way others hadn't, and stayed. Not just when things were easy, but when they weren't. There was love there, but also something steadier, something that didn't fall apart under pressure. At the same time, the life they were living came with its own cost. Nashville had its own pace, its own habits, and somewhere in that environment, Waylon fell into addiction. What started with amphetamines during his early days, alongside Johnny Cash, slowly grew into something heavier. By the time the 1980s came around, cocaine had taken hold, pulling him deeper, draining not just his health but his finances, leaving him buried in debt. And yet, even at that point, the story didn't end there. In 1984, he stepped away from everything, locking himself away in Phoenix and facing the addiction head-on. No slow exit, no gradual change, just a hard stop, and somehow he came out the other side. Still, the years had already left their mark. His health began to decline, diabetes taking its toll, until he eventually stopped touring in 1997. Then, in 2001, his left foot was amputated, a moment that made it clear just how much his body had endured. And not long after, on February 13, 2002, Waylon Jennings passed away at 64. But even in that loss, there was something that stayed. At his funeral, Jessi sang "Storms Never Last," not as a performance, but as something personal, something that carried everything they had been through together. Because for her, the story wasn't defined by the struggle alone, it was defined by what they built through it. There's a moment she later reflected on, when someone suggested that she had been overshadowed by his success, that her own path had somehow been limited by her role beside him. But that wasn't how she saw it. In her eyes, nothing had been taken from her. If anything, she had gained a life that felt full, real, and deeply lived. And in the end, that perspective shaped everything. Being with Waylon didn't take away her voice. It gave it more to say. Every high, every fall, every moment in between became part of her writing, a way to process, to release, to understand. Because for her, music wasn't just something she created, it was how she carried everything she couldn't put into words any other way. And maybe that's what makes their story linger the way it does. Not just because of what the world saw, but because of everything that happened beneath it. The love, the chaos, the survival, and the quiet truth that held it all together. The high cost of being an outlaw, Waylon Jennings' darkest chapter. It didn't start as a downfall. It started as a way to keep up. For Waylon Jennings, Nashville moved at a speed that didn't leave room for pause, and somewhere in that pace, amphetamines slipped in quietly. At first, they felt like a solution, a way to stay sharp, to stay awake, to stay present in a world that demanded more than most people could give. And he wasn't alone in it. Alongside Johnny Cash, it became part of the culture around him, something almost normalized. Something easy to justify when everything around you is moving that fast. But what begins as control rarely stays that way, because while his career was rising, his habits were deepening. On the surface, everything looked like it was finally falling into place. He didn't fit into one sound, and that became his strength. With Willie Nelson and others, he helped shape outlaw country, a movement that pushed back against the system and made space for something more honest. The hits came. The crowds grew, and his name carried weight in a way it hadn't before. And yet, behind all of that, the dependency was tightening its grip. The pills weren't just for long nights anymore. They became part of his rhythm, something his body began to rely on. The line between choice and need started to blur, and by the time the 1980s came around, that shift became impossible to ignore. Cocaine entered the picture, and with it came a different kind of intensity. Faster, harder, more consuming. It wasn't just about the high, it was about escape. The cost alone told the story. Thousands of dollars a day, money disappearing as quickly as it came in. What looked like success on the outside was unraveling underneath, leaving him buried in debt, watching everything he had built begin to feel unstable. And the deeper he went, the harder it became to step back, until there was no way forward without stopping completely. In 1984, something shifted, not gradually, not with hesitation, but all at once. He made the decision to step away, to remove himself from everything that had been feeding the cycle. Phoenix became the place where it happened. No distractions, no safety net, just him, facing everything he had been running from. And it wasn't easy. The withdrawal hit hard, physically and emotionally. Every part of his body reacted, every habit pushing back, demanding to be fed. It was relentless, the kind of pain that doesn't let you rest, the kind that forces you to confront every decision that led you there. But somehow through that, he held on, and he made it out. From that point on, he stayed sober. Not perfectly, not without scars, but firmly. The cycle that had once controlled him no longer dictated his life. But even then, the years he had lived through didn't simply disappear, because addiction leaves its mark long after it's gone. His body carried the weight of it. By the time he reached 51, he needed a quadruple bypass, a clear sign that the damage had already settled in. The lifestyle, the years of pushing past limits had taken something from him that couldn't be restored. And as time moved forward, that reality became harder to ignore. Still, he kept going. He stayed on the road, stayed connected to the music, held on to the part of his life that had always grounded him. Even as diabetes began to take hold, even as his strength started to shift, he didn't step away immediately. Not until 1997, when touring finally came to an end, not by choice, but by necessity. By 2001, the toll had reached a point that couldn't be managed anymore. The amputation of his left foot wasn't just a medical decision. It was the culmination of everything his body had endured. And not long after, on February 13, 2002, his story came to a close at 64. But even with all of that, there was something he never lost. Because through every high, every fall, every moment where things seemed to slip beyond control, music remained the one constant. It wasn't just his career, it was what held him together when everything else threatened to fall apart. And in the end, that belief stayed with him, the idea that music could still bring people together, even in a world that felt divided. 24 years after his death, Jessi Colter opens up about Waylon Jennings. 24 years after his death, the moment that stayed with Jessi Colter wasn't the stage, or the music, or even the fame. It was a quiet Thanksgiving in a hospital room when everything that had been left unsaid finally found its way out. Because by then, Waylon Jennings was already slipping, his body worn down by years that had taken more than they gave back. Diabetes, heart trouble, neuropathy, each one leaving its mark. And standing there beside him, Jessi felt it clearly. The time for waiting had passed. But that moment didn't begin there. It reached all the way back to the 60s, to a place that felt almost like another life, back to Arizona, back to a two-story nightclub called JD's, where everything between them first started to take shape. At that point, Jessi had already walked away from the faith she was raised in. The hymns, the sermons, the world her mother had built, all of it had faded into something distant. In its place, she had leaned into a different way of thinking, one shaped by independence, by reason, by the belief that human will stood at the center of everything. And then there was Waylon. He came from West Texas, from a life that didn't offer much beyond survival. The oldest of 4 boys, raised in a home where music wasn't just a passion, it was a way out. And when he stood on that stage at JD's, there was something about him that didn't need explaining. The force of it, the way the room responded, the way it made everything else feel secondary. It pulled her in before she could step back. She had heard the stories, the women, the pills, the marriages that hadn't lasted. But the man in front of her didn't carry himself like that. There was something measured about him, something calm beneath everything else. And that contrast stayed with her. Their first real connection came on a drive through the painted desert, where the silence around them made space for something deeper. That was where they spoke about faith for the first time. He described the kind of belief he had grown up with, one built on fear, on the constant threat of falling short, on the weight of never quite being enough. It was something he had left behind completely. And when he turned the question toward her, expecting a similar story, she surprised him. Because for her, it hadn't been fear. It had been love. The church her mother led had been filled with something softer, something welcoming. And yet, even with that, she had still stepped away, choosing to explore something else. When he said that the searching probably never really ends, that it continues until the very end, it didn't feel like an idea. It felt like something they were both already living. And maybe that's why their connection settled the way it did. It wasn't built on perfection, it was built on understanding. There were things she loved about him without hesitation. The way he sang, the way he led his band, the way he connected with people in a way that felt effortless. But there was also something she couldn't ignore. The pills, the constant presence of them. Amphetamines that blurred the line between energy and dependence, given names that sounded almost harmless until you saw what they did. And still, she stayed. Not blindly, not without question, but with a kind of belief that there was more to him than what the world assumed. Even her parents saw it. They didn't push her away from him. They didn't try to change him either. Her mother understood something important, that forcing change would only drive him further away, just as she had never forced Jessi to return to a faith she had stepped away from. So they built a life together. Marriage, Nashville, music, a rhythm that felt full from the outside. His career rising, hers finding its own space, their lives moving forward in a way that seemed steady. But beneath that, Jessi felt something missing, something she couldn't quite name until it found her one quiet day at home. There's always God. It didn't arrive like a voice. It felt more like something remembered, something familiar, returning after being buried for too long. And from that moment, something shifted inside her, slowly, quietly, but undeniably. Until one night on stage, without planning it, she found herself kneeling at the piano, praying. And in that moment, everything felt clear, light, whole. She wanted him to feel that too. But Waylon wasn't ready in the same way. He believed in something greater. He admitted that much, but he wasn't ready to define it, not ready to give it a name. And maybe he never would be. That distance between them didn't break anything, but it stayed there, something she had to learn to live with. Meanwhile, his struggles deepened. The pills didn't go away, they evolved. Cocaine entered the picture. The cycle grew heavier, harder to step out of. And while she believed he would find his way through it, she also understood something that never changed. It had to come from him. There were moments when it almost shifted sooner. When Johnny Cash entered rehab, it raised the question of whether the same could be done for Waylon. But even then, she knew it wouldn't work that way. He wasn't someone who could be pushed into change. It had to be his decision. So she waited. And when that moment finally came in 1984, it came completely on his terms. They stepped away from everything, isolating themselves in the Arizona desert. No distractions, no escape. Just the reality of what he had to face. The withdrawal was brutal, every part of his body pushing back. But somehow, through that pain, he made it through. And from that point on, he stayed sober. Still, the years had already taken their toll. By the time he was 51, he needed a quadruple bypass. The damage couldn't be undone, only managed. And as time moved forward, it continued to surface, slowly, steadily, until it became impossible to ignore. Which is what brought everything back to that hospital room. That Thanksgiving, the moment she had been waiting for. When she finally asked him the question she had carried for years, he didn't resist it. He met it with a kind of calm, almost as if he had known it was coming. And as they spoke, something shifted. Not loudly, not dramatically, but deeply. He was ready. And in that quiet exchange, something settled between them. a peace that hadn't been there before. By Christmas, even with everything around him, the machines, the oxygen, the constant reminders of his condition, there was something different about him. The confidence remained, but it had changed. It was no longer the presence of an outlaw on stage. It was quieter, steadier, certain. And then, not long after, it ended. On a February morning in 2002, what seemed like another ordinary day turned into the moment everything stopped. She came home, expecting to continue the routine they had settled into, but the stillness told her before anything else did, before the paramedics, before the confirmation, she already knew he was gone. And yet somehow, not entirely, because what they had built didn't disappear with him. It stayed in the music, in the memories, in the way his story continued to reach people long after he was gone. And for Jessi, it stayed in something even deeper, the belief that through all the chaos, all the struggle, all the waiting, there had always been something guiding it. Now, after all these years, as she begins to open up about what really happened behind closed doors, it's not just about the life they lived in public. It's about everything that existed beneath it, the love that held on, the battles that nearly broke them, and the quiet moment in a hospital room on Thanksgiving when everything finally came into focus. What Jessi Colter's song is your favorite? Share your thoughts with us in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Also click the next video shown on your screen. You will enjoy it.